Okay, I like to shoot in RAW format when I'm out in the field or even doing portrait shots. I've always liked to do RAW files on my images. Now, having said that, I also like to have JPEGs because if I show somebody, especially in the camera, what the image looks like, the RAW files may not look so great, because it has all the digital information in it and no adjustments have been made. The JPEG, however, is being adjusted in the camera and will look probably quite a bit different than the camera RAW file does in the camera until we've adjusted the RAW file to look its best. So if they preview it, or I'm previewing it, and I see a nice looking JPEG, I'm happy. But when I get the chance to work on really important images and want to really fine tune them, I want them in the RAW format, which in Canon world, that would be a CR2 file. So you'd see an image like this. Instead of .jpeg, it would say .cr2. And we're going to work on an image right now. If I do a file open, now you see the CR2 file for a St. Louis fountain.cr2. So this image will allow greater latitude as I work on it. Another thing is, if I have this image as a JPEG, I can still work on it in Camera Raw. It used to be that you had to lie to Photoshop basically to bring a JPEG into Camera Raw to work on it. And the benefits of working on images inside of the Camera Raw filter are enormous. So let me show you real quick on this image that we just worked on. I'm going to cancel that for a second. And this image, if we wanted to work on it in Camera Raw, we can go up to Filter and down to Camera Raw Filter. It's going to open up exactly the same place, but let me show you a few of the differences that you will experience if you open up your images inside of Camera Raw. For example, white balance as shot only has these three items under this is the basic tab right here. If we go over to the camera icon, which is camera calibration, and click on processes, you'll only see this. But if we open up a Camera Raw file, let me do that again. Now in this image you see under as shot for white balance, I don't know why I'm saying that today, you see all of these options. So all you have to do to try them, just go to auto and just buzz through these and see the changes that it makes. And don't feel like you're cheating if you decide to go with one of these. This warms the image up a bit. Tungsten looks terrible. If you're under tungsten light, it would look different. See the blues become a little more extreme under the fluorescent flash. Gets back to a more normal look. Custom. So as shot would be right out of the camera the way it was. Now if we go over here to the camera calibration, you notice now we have a new tab under camera profile, and we also have these items. So if we click on landscape, notice the building here got a little bit bluer. Let me back up so you can see. All right, neutral, portrait, and camera standard. So are these major concerns? No. The big benefit of shooting in Camera Raw is you have greater latitude of control on your images if they are in Camera Raw, or if they're in RAW format. So if we were going to adjust this image, we could do some very quick things. You see, we don't have really any sky here, but we can certainly make the water look better. the building look better. And a lot of times that will come out of trying these, and that definitely warmed up our statue and the buildings in the back, but we can make them look far better if we just experiment. Let's go with that for now. The exposure, best way to do is to move it around just to see what is good, or for the most part you're eyeballing things, making a judgment call based on your experience. I'm going to go down to highlights and show you this changing basically the building. Every photograph you take, it could be slightly different. If we go down with the highlights, you can see more of the building on this right side. This is neutral. It's very, very light. Bring that down and it becomes much darker right there. Shadows doesn't mean anything more than you're making more shadows, or you're bringing some of the detail out in the shadows. Okay, so you can see this was neutral, and if you look at these trees, how much shadow there is in those. So if you bring that up a little bit, don't get crazy with it, just open up the shadows a little bit. Now whites and blacks down here are a little bit different. The trick to working with these comes by holding down the Alt key on a Mac, or on a PC, and the Option key on a Macintosh. So we hold down the Alt key and drag this to the right until we start seeing digital information come in. So you see that at the top, there's the right side of the building. Now take the blacks the same way, hold down the Alt or Option key until information comes in, keep sliding, and there's some digital information. So you've got the blacks and whites set pretty nicely in the image. Another thing that I like to do, if the image is really important and I want to bring the colors to what I feel like I saw when I photographed it, you would go right here to a thing called HSL/grayscale. Start with luminance. Now we can just click this and immediately turns into a grayscale image, or black and white. But we would normally change these colors starting with luminance tab selected. So a lot of times I will just throw the sliders over to one side. You saw what the orange did to the building back here and the pedestal for the statue. Yellows. Now the greens are going to affect the trees and the grass and so forth. So you look at the greens and see what's being affected. Not so much in the trees as it is back here in the background. See how it's changing lighter and darker, because luminance means light. So it's the amount of light in this particular color. So the greens become brighter if I go to the right, and darker greens to the left. Aquas, you can see the building is changing. Some images you won't see any changes in aquas, or may not be any aqua in the image. Blues, you would normally start by taking it to the left. If we had blue sky, which we got maybe just a drip of blue here and here, it would normally go to the left. Purples, if you got them, you got to look around, moving the slider. Magentas, same way. Then you go to saturation. I know this seems like, a lot of slider stuff. Well, if you don't like it, if you've gone too far or you've really messed up your color, you hold down the Alt or Option on a Mac and you get a reset. So all these things would return to normal and you could start all over. And you don't have to do any of this. That's the nice part. But on an image that I really want to rock, I start working with the HSL to get the colors just right. You can't even imagine. Now look at the statue starting to become yellow if I move it too far to the right, and kind of takes the color out if I go to the left. Let's look at the yellows again. So I'm going to bring a little bit more in, watching the grass back here as I move the green again. looking at the building because I know aquas are in that, and then now the blues. Now, under luminance, we took the blues to the left. Under saturation, we take the blues to the right. Look what's happening on the building to the blues. Okay, also the water is becoming more blue. Let's look again at the purples. Doesn't look like we're affecting anything. So let's go to U, and now look at the reds. Now the bus back here is red. The car back there is red. You can see what's happening to them. Oranges, dramatic effect on those. Best I remember, this is closer to the color of the base of the statue. Now the yellows, kind of warming up that building back in there in that reflection. Now the blues again. When you run the slider on under saturation, under U, this U means color. So you're actually changing the color in the image of the blues. So when you get to this and start messing with the blues, you can make your blues teal and so forth. So be really careful when you do the U on your colors. Okay, let's just see if there's any. There's still no purples. Magenta showing. We've really made the colors pop here. So let's, we've got a magnifying glass, so I'm just going to click, zoom in a little bit. If I hold my space bar down, I can move around. And I think overall the image has a pleasing effect. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, just clicking because the enlargement tool or the zoom tool is there by default. Now if you start getting noise in the image, you'll see these little dots of grain, and I'm not seeing much in the way of noise. But if we did, you go to these little sharpen, like two pyramids here, and you've got sharpening here if you want to sharpen your image. You also can take some of the noise down if you bring luminance up. So if you look, we're making the things here a little more fine, a little smoother. Notice detail automatically jumped up. If we go down here, as soon as we move luminance detail jumps, but you can always drag detail back. And what that's trying to do is preserve detail, still trying to give some crispness to the image, while luminance is smoothing out problem spots. All right, let's just say we've got it about where we want this. If we want to sharpen it, let's see. Trying to find something good to work on. Let's watch these little limbs here as we take the sharpening up. You should have been able to see that really sharpen quite a bit. I'll take it back to the left. See the change happening. And again, you can smooth some of that out right here. And then we'll just click on open image when we're ready. But let's make sure we can also go in here to right here, lens correction. And you can say manual and change things, and you can see some sliders here to deal with. Under profile, if you tell it to remove chromatic aberration, that's automatic. Enable profile corrections, and it will look up your camera and the lens you are using automatically. If you don't find it, it'll allow you to look for it. Notice we have the drop down, so it will allow you to scan through those to find your camera and your lens. So if you have some distortions in your lens, this is a great place to go. So I'm going to click on open image. It goes back into Photoshop. and opens the image up in here with the corrections made. So I'm going to zoom in. Now I zoomed in then holding down my control key and my space bar, and I clicked and dragged an area and let it pop to that. And you can see we've got a pretty sharp image. But one thing I like to do, again, it's a matter of, if this is a whole roll of film, so to speak, or a whole shot series. If we went out to do landscapes one day and we've got 200-300 photographs, we're not going to do this. But if you find a prize photograph, what I like to do is go to Filter, down to Sharpen, and Shake Reduction. This runs in a logarithm to look at the image and see if, while you're taking the picture, you might have jerked the camera a little bit, even just a tiny bit, and this will figure it out and sharpen accordingly. So you just click Shape Reduction or Shake Reduction. Now you notice it drew this box in this area, and you can move that box wherever you want to. What the box is best doing is being put where you actually did focus from. So I believe my Running Man was the focal point. So I'm not only going to move it, I'm going to also click on the edges and drag it in to focus just on him. So you saw the thing run. We've got like a caution sign up in the top right of the image. You can't see because it's off the recording area. Let me see if I can bring this in a little bit, but now that's gone off. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. But you notice over here in the history, I've got my tab set up with my open and shake reduction done. So if I see that it's too much right now, zoom in again, and it's sharpened. If I go to Edit, down to Fade Shake Reduction, it's like doing a shake reduction on a slider. So if I go all the way to the left with this, see how soft this, I mean, we thought it was fairly sharp, right, coming out of camera raw. But here is what the filter just did it, shape reduction. So we can say we'll be satisfied with something in between there. You have to decide. You don't want it over sharpened. It will really show up in a print if your lines are this sharp and too detailed. I mean, it'll look kind of odd. So we'll go back to about a 75 in this case. That's not a solid number for every image. You just have to look at it. All right, so now if I step back to when it was open and shake reduction and then editing the shake reduction a little bit. Here's the original. So let's zoom out, Control 0 or Command 0 on a Mac. These were the colors that we started with, and here's what we ended up with. So not tons of changes. Now you got to remember, when I say this is what we started with, this is what we started with after it was in camera raw. So all of these colors and everything are already changed before it ever came into Photoshop. So all this is representing as a final step is the sharpening that was done. So I wanted to show you this to give you an idea what camera raw can do. Let's go back and revisit it one more time. So I'm going to open this actually by going here to camera raw filter. We can go back there anytime we want to, and we can kind of pile on, as I might, if I can say that. We can keep making adjustments in here as we go. We just don't want to get too crazy. But if this were a problem finding like the color cast that we dealt with in the previous image, here we have a white point or a white balance tool that we can use, And you can come into the image and say, click on a nice white. We've got a baseball player back here at St. Louis. Imagine a baseball player. Just click on that white area, and you notice, bam, it really jumped the colors a little bit. We click OK, and we can see the difference. Go back one. We had it warmed up here, and that kind of cooled the image down. We've got more blues down in the water fountain, a little bluer up there. Excuse me. But we've lost all the warmth. It was towards the setting sun time of day, so this is probably more accurate than this. But using the white balance tool would have been a good thing if we were first working on the image, instead of coming back later and do a white balance check. If I did one off the fountain, you see we got a little bit of that warmth back again. Now, the fountain would probably be a little too white, but that's okay. There's a street lamp. See how it's changing. Now, sometimes you can click in the wrong place and really get some terrible results. So you can't just click from anywhere in the image, but sometimes where you click can give you just that magic look. It just really makes your colors pop. Like the red bus back here, probably going to be pretty terrible, and it is. So let's go back to the building again, or the fountain. So this white balance is very, very nice. But we're going to save a lot of this stuff for lesson number 5. All of these tools in here you're going to get familiar with. So we'll return to that in lesson 5, but I wanted you to see some color correction take place in this piece of software as well. But right now, we want to concentrate on what's going on inside of Photoshop's main set of tools, instead of just in the raw filter. Okay, now we're going to talk about the file size. Very important. We all either print our images, or we send some via email, or maybe we post some photographs on Facebook. Just a plethora of ways of saving and dealing with images, and you need to know how all those come into play, and that's what we're going to talk about now. All right, first thing we need to do is look at the size and the resolution of this image. This is the one we're going to save this to be printed. We're going to save this to be put on Facebook and sent an email. So let's get started. We will go to Image, down to Image Size. Click. Here it shows you a preview of the image, and you can make it smaller if you want to. Here are the dimensions of the image. A very odd size. You would normally think in terms of a 16 by 20 versus 11 by 17, or an 11 by 14. So the main thing is this is a raw file, so the resolution is 300, which is, if you want to print something, this is the ideal resolution to print. So let's look at this as a print image first. Let's say we want to make this into an 8 by 10. Well, we go to the largest number first, and let's see, the 17 is the largest. Let's try to change that into a 10. Well, then you notice it becomes a 6.667 by 10. So let's try this as an 8 by 10. So we put 8 in here, and it becomes an 8 by 12. Now, either way, we're making this a little bit smaller, so we want to go and say by cubic sharper reduction. This does some, again, some mathematical work to give you the best possible image based on the fact that you're reducing it somewhat physically. So we're going to click OK. Now, if we go to the crop tool, which is really helpful, we know this image is too big. And if we want to turn rulers on, we can quickly do that with Control or Command on a Mac and the letter R as in railroad. Command or Control R. So with Control R or Command R pressed, we get rulers going across the top, rulers going down the left side. If you move your cursor into the rulers and double click, you get the preferences box pops up and allows you to set this differently if you wish to. And just cancel that. And we can go ahead and change that to pixels if we want to, but we don't want to. We're making an 8x10 and that's in inches. If you're going to put something on a website, then a lot of times we'll deal in pixels, most times actually. So let's cancel that, and we have our rulers, and you can also right click on rulers and change it to pixels and so forth too. Alright, so we can see right now we have a 12 instead of a 10, but we have the 0 to 8 inches, so up and down it's the right size. Widthwise it is not. So we can go to the crop tool or press the letter C, and we can put it in here. The width, we want it to be 10, so we can put in a 10, and over here we want an 8, and notice that 300 is already there. If it's not in yours, then you would want to change that. Now we don't have to go with where this jumped to. This box is called the rule of thirds box. Each one of these points is normally considered the greatest point of interest in the image. If you place your subject in one of these points, it's going to bring better balance to the image, make it more interesting, I guess is probably one of the better ways to put it. But we can also drag down these handlebars, and as it moves like this, it's maintaining the 8x10 ratio. So if we change any of that, it's okay. It's still 8x10. It seems odd to get used to. If I click on this to move this crop area, I click, hold it down, and if I want to move the box to the right, I'm actually shifting the image, I'm moving it to the left. May seem counterproductive, but nonetheless, that's what it is. So our area at the base is pretty much locked in. We can make it smaller, but we can't get more of the fountain in unless we take this all the way to its upward boundaries. So it's maintaining the 8x10 that way. Okay. If our focus is the running man, we can put him over here on one of the points. So he's lined up over here on the rule of the eighths. And if we double click, it goes ahead and crops it. And there's what your image would look like, cropped as an 8x10 at 300 pixels per inch, which is what any regular printer is going to ask you to make your PPI or your pixels per inch 300. Dots per inch actually is DPI. Okay, so I can do a Control-Alt-Z and go back a space and click the crop tool again, and let's just say we want all the fountain we can get. We'll put running man more towards the middle, although artistically speaking in a photograph it's really not the best plan to put your subject in the middle of a photograph. So I always try to at least get the subject a little bit out of the middle. So I'm going to try to go with something more like that. All right, so let's say we've got our image all ready. If we wanted to print this now, we could go to File, Save As, and I usually will put print, and sometimes I'll put the actual size, 8x10, and I use underscore to separate the words. Sometimes computers don't like blank spaces, especially if you're dealing with the internet. It can cause some issues if you leave blanks. It's just a habit I got into for a few years when I was a webmaster at college. So we'll just say OK. Notice this is a JPEG. If you want to switch it to another format, here's the time to do it. But most people can accommodate a JPEG and just click Save. Okay, so I'm not going to save that one. We're going to return to the image and say we want to put this in an email or put it on Facebook. So this image is a horizontal, that is, it's wider than it is long. So if we're putting it on the internet, we usually want to deal with pixels. And I can give you this as a really strong rule of thumb. Let's change this to inches, or pixels, sorry. The first thing we want to change is resolution. We're not printing this, we're emailing it or putting it on Facebook or one of the other places on the internet to post images. So we change this to 72. If the resolution is any higher than this, it's wasting space and you're wasting your time because you're not going to get better quality out of the image on the internet. Okay. Now, because it's a horizontal image, the top number should be bigger, and typically 640 would be the number would be put in to the top. 640 pixels. The number underneath it doesn't matter. You don't touch it. You just touch the top one. All right. 72 first, though. Don't change this one and then the 72. If you do, it'll change that number again. So we click OK. Now, since we're saving this, if we do a Control-0, it'll fill the screen again. Notice we made it a lot smaller, but the quality still isn't bad at all. So we're going to now compress this and have a preview of it and how good it's going to look. And to do that, we can go to File, to Export, Save for Web. Just click that. You get a huge box and you get previews. Now yours may just have a 2-up. When you first open it, it may just have this. So go to at least 2-up. I prefer 4-up. The first one is the original image, so you can click and drag through and see it. That's the way it looked before we brought it inside. Here is a compressed version of it with only a quality of 18. Now the trick is you want this to be bigger in there so you can see how the image is holding up as you change the quality. So I'm going to hold down my Control and click a few times. Notice here's the original again, and here's the really compressed version of it, and it's really fallen apart very quickly. So I'm going to click on that again, and I'm going to raise the quality of this. Just click in the middle. Notice how much better it is already. But the original, if you look down here, was almost 100 or almost a megabyte, 960K. This is only 92K. So it's really compressed, and it's not going to take very long to download. It's not going to take up much space if you put it on Facebook or wherever. And I normally will put this on optimized. Progressive, if you use that, if you've ever seen an image come up in your web browser that looks really terrible and then it starts getting better and better and better, that's a progressive, and that is a much larger file, and it really doesn't help things at all to use that. The trick is to make this as small as you can, this number here, and still maintain the quality and look in the image. Okay, so if you look through there, there's not a lot of difference between these two images. If we go down, now we start to see, if you look at his leg, the squares are much more prominent. So be careful. It's down to 65, down to 70. Let's smooth that leg out a little bit more. And watch these things in the background. I think that looks pretty good at 47, and it's only 87K. So again, we go down to the bottom. Let me run my recording area down. Let's see if I can get, nope, can't bring it up. Bring this down. So now we just click save, and the same thing again. We can put it on the internet and maybe put something like to_email, and then click save. Now the other way to do it is just go to, let me move the recording area back up, is to go to File, Save As. You can choose JPEG and click Save, and it says, lets us decide, noticing the size over here of the image. But that's total guesswork. You don't have any idea as you make this smaller and smaller what the image is going to look like. So best, if you're going to reduce it like that to send in an email or post on Facebook or something, is go to File, down to Export, and Save for Web. Or the shortcut obviously is Alt-Shift-Control-S, and that's what I use all the time. I hold down the Control-Alt-Shift and hit S and bring up the 4 up, because that's the way it'll default. After you do it the first time, it'll give you all 4 up. Okay, you say that's all well and good, but what if my image is a vertical image instead of horizontal? And let me show you what I mean real quick. I'm going to crop this differently. I'm going to change this to a 10, or actually put 8 in here and 10 here, and now it's a vertical image. That is, it's taller than it is wide. So again, I'm going to move the area a little bit to put the running man over at one of the grid intersections, and I'm just going to double click, and let's do a Control-0 to fill the screen. Still a nice looking image, nothing breathtaking certainly, but this is just for example. It's not something I would normally print or put on a wall. But now if we look at the image under image size, it is showing in pixels. Let's change that to inches. It is a perfect 8x10 300 resolution. But now we want to save this again for email or to post on Facebook. So we go back to image size again, change this to 72, and this time, because it's a vertical, we don't want it 576 or 640. We want it to be about 450, because it's so much longer, people will have to scroll off the screen to see it if we're not careful. If you change that back into what inches would be, you see it's a 6x7 right now. It's still a pretty good size. So let's go back to pixels. 450 for vertical, 640 if it's a horizontal. That's for posting on the internet or sending through an email. Click OK. Again, Control-0 to fill your screen, or Command-0. Then we want to do the Control Alt Shift S to bring the 4 up into play. And again, we will change the slider on quality to get the best quality based on the original over here. Then click on the Save button down here and put it on the desktop and give it an appropriate name. Okay, so that should give you the basics as far as saving images for Facebook or for printing and so forth. Be sure if you're printing the image that you're using 300 pixels per inch, or DPI, sorry. That even applies if you're printing this as a vertical. You want the DPI to be 300. All right, let's back up in history and let's go to image size. We want to say this is a vertical, 300 here. We change it back to inches if we're going to print it, and these numbers would basically be reversed. It would be 12 and 8. So let's do a Control-0 so we can see the whole thing, and then we can do a crop. And whoop, sorry about that. Hit escape. Just click once to get the tools that we want. Double click on the crop and Control-0 again, and there it is, to 300 crop, ready for printing. Make a nice print. All right, hopefully that gives you some good information on resolution for mailing, for posting, for printing. So what if you ran into an image like this one? This is something that you won't run into necessarily, but let's just fill that background with white. Let's just go down here, create another layer. Don't worry about this part here, please. So you might scan an image on a scanner or get an image like this from somebody else. It probably won't be this sloppily turned, but I have seen many scans. I've made some scans where I didn't get the image on the scanner bed squared up. Even a little bit can be a problem. So think about that when you're getting ready to do something with it. You've got to straighten the image out, right? So it's all in one image here. So if we go to the crop tool or press the letter C, you've got this particular tool. There's also a straighten there. You can go off any straight lines in the image you choose to. For example, you can click and drag across the bottom corner. You can, let me escape, you can click up here on that little straightener and click up here and go down to the bottom, and it will straighten. And then you just bring your top and bottom and sides in and double click, and it's straightened out. So that's one way to do it. Let's do a Control-Alt-Z. Let's say you want to straighten it by this building right here. So you click and drag a straight line down, and it's lined up with this line you can see. Hit escape again. You can line it up based on, sorry about that. Straighten. Line it up based on the base. So just draw a straight line on out. So whichever way you want to do it will work. Sometimes you'll lose just a little bit on the edges because you got to bring it in a little bit. Otherwise you're liable to leave a little white detail here and there. But that should give you the idea. I sometimes will take a photograph and not have the photograph perfectly horizontal to my subject, and it's a little bit problematic when you do that. Another thing you can do is just click a selection around it and do a Control T to transform that selection, and you can just select what you want out of the image and line it up the way you want to line it up, and double click. Now obviously that would need to be on its own layer, so it looks something like that. So that straightens up the perspective and everything in the image too. So just some hopefully helpful hints on some of the tools there. So this wraps up the second video under lesson 2.